Hey, buddy.
Can you hear me now? No.
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh my goodness, my man. You know it ain't us. It ain't us. Stuff like this
We know.
happens, man.
Wow.
And I've been saying this every single time we
That's
interview
awesome,
you.
dude.
It's all of us together.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
every
man,
time.
There is some kind of like anti-technology
dude.
amongst the three of us. Like it's just a combination, and it just goes.
Yeah,
That's a sign, man.
absolutely. We said that
Have
last time.
the history of this. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I had to close out
Dude.
everything, and like I cleared my cookies, refreshed, I did all the stuff. Then I did passwords to get into stuff. I was just ridiculous. But thank you so much for your patience.
Yes.
No
Get out.
Man, how are you guys? Happy birthday, sis.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
what
you.
are you now, like 31 or something?
I am. Thank you so much. You know what? I
Mhm.
love you. My brother from another mother.
Yeah, my sister from another mister. Man, see, a lot of people don't know this, but we're like pretty much like family now since I came and visited you guys.
That's right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
I had such a good time. And been looking forward to being back with you guys forever. So I'm excited.
Yeah, as are we, man. I know you're going to be coming back out this way eventually, maybe in
Yep.
September. I was talking, and I know this didn't really go on the air, but we're doing the Mass Paracon. I think it's in September, and I think you're going to be there too, right?
I
All
believe
right.
so. Yeah, yeah. Um, Depending on what COVID does, we never know with that monster. But I'm looking forward to it.
Worth.
I think
But
it's in Quincy, man.
that's right. As are we, and yeah, boy, we had a bunch of jokes, and I was
Yeah.
going to talk about my cup. The
Believe
show
me.
may or may not be brought to you by Connect Seeds of Canada. But oh my gosh, I planted those seeds or something this morning. The way things are going. But we'll get right to things because, shit, what are we gonna do, man? It's a late
I
start.
know,
And
right?
I had your bio going. I had all kinds of stuff. I had videos. We're ready to roll. But yeah, it's Kristen's birthday. We're representing. We got a Rush shirt going on. She's got
Thank
a
you.
brand new outfit.
Outfit from my mom.
So yeah,
Oh my goodness. And
Yeah.
you also got you got a Rush T-shirt on.
He
I
does.
do. And
Oh,
Kristen
This-
actually did this for me. And a year ago, what was going on? We were doing
The Kermit.
the Kermit.
The
It was,
Kermit. So you have. Yeah.
Popular
I know
videos
you
of us
saw that. And,
doing the Kermit dance. We were all doing all the
It's-
self-isolation because of COVID a year ago. It was just really
dude, I
bad.
remember you spraying all your groceries. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
I was
do.
washing the groceries.
Like
Yeah.
we're bringing steaks in. You're like, shh. Power of Christ compels you.
That's right. We were exercising those COVID demons.
Hell yeah.
Man. Holy
Yeah.
water and everything.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
So how have you been? What's going on in
I've
the?
been good. Not much. I'm still finished. I'm not finished. I'm finished with the book. It's out for format right now.
Mhm. That being
But
the
man, yeah. But I'm telling you what, guys. Whatever's going on right now in the skies it concerns me deeply. George Knapp and Jimmy Corbell just published some new videos on their Mystery Wire on Twitter. I don't know if you guys have seen them yet, but they're basically flying pyramids in the sky that are flashing a light as one solid object. Like it's not a small light, and then the other part of the ship is just not lit up. The entire stinking triangle lights up. Boom.
Really?
There were three of them. Yeah, our ships picked them up. There were three of them. I'm concerned.
I haven't heard that. I know the name Corbell, but we have not heard any of that.
Not the pyramids.
Yeah,
No.
he's a documentarian. He created the documentary The Hunt for the Skinwalker, and he went to the ranch and everything.
Yes.
But man, guys, we have cases where they're 70,000 feet in the air, and they're turning off our missile silos. Boop.
Come on,
Oh,
like
that's
an
really high.
EMP.
I think
Yep.
a 747 flies somewhere around like 40,000 feet, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. Yeah.
Really double, and it has the power to just shut it off from that height.
Wow.
I think it's time that we stop looking at this as nothing but a threat.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
it should be. I mean, it should be obvious, right? When we have a presence in this world that has that kind of capabilities, it's not the fact that okay, well, they're not doing anything yet. Mm-mm. That's like somebody walking into your home, killing your ADT alarm system, taking your food, and then just walking out. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
no big deal. No big deal. We're good.
In a
No, we're
flash.
not.
In a
Yeah.
flash, and it's gone in a flash. It's funny, last night I had a long night. I could not sleep. We were up watching documentaries and different
Me
things.
too, dude.
Things I researched was this idea of 0-point mapping with black holes as a way of propulsion for UFOs, aliens to travel, and maybe more things. And I guess we'll get into that, like the discarnate and perhaps other entities around the globe, just instantly. And physicists have been trying to prove this like since the 60s. This idea came about that if you take an object and it's spinning fast enough and it is on the edge of a black hole and you split it right there just at the cusp, that half of it will get sucked into the black hole, the other half will shoot in a straight line to potentially a planet, another black hole. And this has been proven somewhat. They ended up having to use audio waves. We couldn't get the objects to spin fast enough to break them in a lab. But the theory, more or less, is proven in physics. This also, if you look at the black hole's planetary system around us, forms this 0-point mapping, creates a geometric pattern through the Earth, which may explain some of the ley life phenomena. There are entry points and exit points where things could just kind of fly in, boom, boom, go to another point, zip across, the other side of the planet, zip back through the universe. So these flying pyramids, I mean, they could just be putting themselves over our skies in a pattern that is, at this point seems unpredictable, but maybe there is a pattern to it. That's what I'm wondering.
You know what? When you're talking about ley lines and portals, Steve Mera has a great lecture on that. Him and Barry Fitzgerald did like a 2.5-hour lecture, and you guys gotta check it out. I mean, they have film of these things entering into our atmosphere, just like boop, and then like floating off in the horizon. But you're right, and let's getting back to this is why I love being on the show. It's just so organic and everything, Getting back to the 0-point energy, it's like Dr. Barry Taff was talking about how there's a lot of phenomenon in some of his cases where like a refrigerator or something would like just begin moving under some other control, and the physics were of such that if that kind of energy existed, it should have exploded. But because it didn't, we're looking at something that is it has to be interdimensional. It has to be to where it's either operating on its own physics, or I don't know at this point, but I think it's very fascinating.
I agree, and the idea time beyond the movement through space, time also changes with black holes, which gives me the idea that the beings we're talking about could be ancient beyond our comprehension.
Correct. Yeah.
Or they could be from the future coming back.
Right.
And we've talked a lot about biblical references of demonic presences and things of that nature, and ghouls and things like that. And I often wonder, like, these creatures, are they from the future coming back to change the population? We talk about insemination and pregnancies.
Right.
And how many abductees have talked about, being inseminated and their baby taken from them?
Man.
Those babies, as having some sort of visitation with them prior to it being removed and disappearing into obscurity, of them having maybe large eyes, being some kind of hybrid between what they viewed or perceived the aliens to be and human, and there's like all these levels, some of which look exactly human. So you wonder if they're in our population, is the population changing?
Right.
Man, so This is really interesting. So my latest research right now is focused. It's obviously been focused on how our ancestors have been interpreting this phenomenon, and I do believe that our ancestors interpreted this phenomenon as it was a piece of the afterlife. Right now in Göbekli Tepe, if you went there, they have what are called eye statues or eye idols, EYE idols, and they have no mouths. The only thing they have are large eyes. These eye idols were designed to represent deceased ancestors. And anthropologists, they come out and said, okay, upon examination, we believe that the reason our ancestors created these idols was because, this is very cool, man, they were trying to communicate to us how their ancestors who were deceased were communicating to them.
Right.
This gets good, guys. All right. And they said that here's the issue. These idols do not have mouths. All they have are eyes. And so they said, so the language system that these ancestors were communicating through didn't need a mouth.
Mm-hmm.
It's telepathy.
Exactly, telepath.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it's
I mean,
terribly.
it's
There's another parallel with the paranormal mediums, right? And
yes.
People who have spiritual experiences, of which we've both had. You know, we're into that stuff. I'll tell you, so it's very personal. I had a spiritual communication with my mom at one time, and when it happened, let me just describe this real quick. I had to set up something in my house that reminded me very much and mentally, psychologically put myself in a place where she was still alive, and I did feel this communication come. Everything came as like a stream of thought in my head. It felt extremely external to me. It was mostly images.
Very well put.
I knew what the images meant, and I knew what the message was, but it wasn't the same thing as clairaudience when somebody whispers your name in your ear or something like that. It was more like just a stream of imagery, even pictures of words, which is kind of weird, but things that made me understand what she was trying to tell me. And I have to tell you, it felt so external. It's like I know it wasn't from my own mind, because the things also were things I would have never thought of. So this idea of telepathy with the aliens, I think is almost like a universal language, is where I'm going with all that.
It may be. And guys, I mean, obviously it's a form of communication, but this evidently they've been experiencing this for thousands of years.
Yep,
You know,
sure. I think that definitely, especially Göbekli Tepe now.
Oh yeah. And so let's get into the idea of idolatry and what idolatry meant in Mesopotamia. So your first idols were created to appear like people that had died. So what would happen in families is when an elderly person or somebody, obviously an elderly person, but as an ancestor would die, they would take the body, they would bury it, but then they would go immediately and they would create a metallic image of that deceased person. And the consciousness of that individual, they believed, would rest itself in that image of them. And so what they were doing, even in biblical antiquity in Mesopotamia, is they were learning, at least these entities were learning how to merge consciousness with metal. And I want to suggest that's why we have a great percentage of UFO abductees and experiencers who, when they're on the ship itself is alive. And I believe they've learned how to, instead of like just saying, okay, we're going to create idols. No, I think they've evolved to a point now where their consciousness is in the ship, and it's interacting with. It's really interesting.
It is.
It's terribly interesting.
We've heard a lot of stories like that before, and everybody says that the ship is more like biological. It's in itself, and that does make a lot of sense.
Right. And sometimes
right?
Themselves are more like a drone, or they don't seem to. They don't seem to be a part of the consciousness. Like they're just almost like a mechanical thing. That the whole thing is one entity, and even though you might perceive, a group of large-headed children like aliens, they don't really seem to have individual personalities or anything. It's all one.
Right. Yes, a unified stream of consciousness. Where, see, now the consciousness has an image. And that, I think also that's why a lot of these entities, when we see them, they're almost operating in unison, where you can have like 20 of them or 3 or 4 of them, and there's one consciousness, one thing going on, at least in mission. But I think it's really interesting because if we can understand that consciousness obviously exists out of the body, then there has to be a scientific aspect of it too, as how they're merging with metal, right?
Right.
I don't think that's just a purely spiritual phenomenon. I think that we're dealing with highly evolved entities. I mean, like almost godlike.
They would certainly appear to be gods to us. And, everybody
Yeah.
knows the Anunnaki story and
Hmm.
the idea of these giants and gods that came in and populated the human race, which just
Hmm.
follows right in line with a lot of these abduction stories we
Hmm.
hear. But the aforementioned babies that, go missing, and apparently sometimes are seen
Yeah.
in like jar-like things with a brown liquid, and
Hmm.
nobody knows what happens to them, right? It just
Exactly right.
there seems to be an underlying truth through all these things, and like you say, in
Hmm.
Mesopotamia, they would take the clay idols, right, and they would put the god in them. They would treat the
Hmm.
idol like gods. The
Hmm.
idol
Now it's metal,
metal, right? And
Hmm. Yeah.
and
Exactly right.
totally correlation with that.
It's
what do you
it's.
know is
I'm sorry.
would be for? What do you suppose? What why they would evolve to a metal for transportation reasons? For
Hmm. Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
or
Transportation reasons. There might be um, there might be scientific reasons as well. Like it may have been easier for them to merge with metal than anything else. Um, but again, what we're dealing with, guys, is something that is transcendent. It has transcended the microcosm of our reality. It can recreate a new reality for us if it wants to. Most importantly, it's very interesting because when we get into the UFO abduction phenomenon, we have cases where people will be pulled, the soul will be pulled out of their body
Hmm.
and then abducted into a ship where gets very unique, where they're not working on the body, they're working on the soul,
Hmm.
and it's manifesting on the body. What do I mean by that? Because I had a gentleman that messaged me whose father was a remote viewer. I've mentioned it to you guys before, and his father would leave his body, and he would meet entities, these guides, which they're not guides. They've never been our guides. They're not lovey and cuddly and give us jelly beans and coloring books. No. Once he got in contact with them, often enough, one night they reversed their apparition of what they really looked like, gave that man a coronary. Soon as his soul got back into his body, his body began to manifest Egyptian hieroglyphs and religious amulets on his chest. I do
That's right.
believe I want to throw that out there. I want to throw this. Okay, I want to suggest that what we've been looking at as like bodily abduction is not just bodily abduction. They're abducting the soul and the body. And I think they're obviously doing things to the body, like, semen samples, taking ova from females. Um, but I think it's more involved than that. Isn't that interesting? The
terribly,
soul.
terribly. I wonder if
That's a good way to put it. Terribly.
Yeah.
terribly exactly. Thinking back of those Anunnakis, the um, theory there that Sitchin put out was that they wanted the gold. They wanted to create a race of
Mhm.
slaves to get gold. But
Yeah.
do they really need the gold? And maybe does that tie into the theory that they're possessing metal?
Yes, it does. Yes. So this aspect of metallurgy is all throughout the Levant and throughout history. Matter of fact, the very first implant came from merging consciousness with metal, and then taking the metal that had consciousness on it and placing it in a dead body, and that consciousness would possess the dead body, and it would exist again through the portal of metal. So it's just an incredible thought, but yeah, that's where the original implant comes from. And I do believe, going over some of these By the way, you guys got to get this book. Beyond UFOs, a study of consciousness.
That looks
It's
like
incredible. It's
Oh my
huge, bro. It's huge. I mean, I've already got it dog-eared and everything. But,
yeah, that looks awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm going to read. Okay, so we're dealing with the unified stream of consciousness and how they were merging consciousness with metal, placing the metal in the body, and now there's a field. It's very interesting. So I'm going to read an account to you. I'm here. Yeah, so I'm going to read this account to you. Actually, no, I'm going to read another one. Bear with me, guys, because
Take your time.
we have
Yeah.
a case study here. We have a case study here where the experiencer, dude, this is nuts. He's laying in bed, and all of a sudden, he said something turned on in him, just doop. And he said there was a secondary consciousness with him. And he said, I'm not seeing through my eyes. I'm seeing through the eyes of a ship that is, and he said, I could see it as it's coming over my house, right where he was. What? So what we're dealing with, right, like I said, it's a unified stream of consciousness. But in biblical antiquity, we would call that demonic possession, where they would have access to us. We would have access to it, and there's somewhat of a covenant being made in that moment.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, here we go. I call it switching eyes. In an earlier experience, I was 10 years old. I was in bed, wide awake, 12 p.m. I felt like I was floating above the bed. It was like gravity was gone. It also felt like my life just flopped upside down. There was a blinding flash from the west side of the house coming through the window. I was immediately aware that for some reason I was seeing through someone else's eyes. As they approached the house from the west, I did not know who they were or how it was possible to see through its eyes. I just felt it was somehow able to read my thoughts, and it was allowed to be looking through my eyes. I have come to understand it as a two-way channel that once opened can only work one way. They entered my room, and this gets back into unified consciousness in terms of these entities. Is this okay? Is this good?
Absolutely.
Okay. So he says that there's a two-way channel. He said, but they entered my room marching in perfect unison. One consciousness here. Crossing in front of my desk at the door, I could see their shape in some detail. They were on a mission. So, what the H?
Right?
Right. It's a movement of consciousness, dual consciousness, shifting.
Yes. And I think that is perhaps how they're locating a lot of us. Is they're carving consciousness in the metal, using that as an implant, putting it in us, and then turning it on like a channel. Boop. There they are.
Sure.
I like the sound
That's
effects.
nuts. Yeah, right? I've been working on that one. No. But, oh my God, guys.
Yeah. What does that mean for humanity, you know? I wonder, again, with those abductees and the babies that may be missing, that are taken, how do they get back into population? And, you think about, illegal aliens crossing the border. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe someone, because how does a person here, right? If there's no birthright and stuff, could aliens, hybrids,
So.
I mean, the idea of a baby showing up on a doorstep anymore is kind of like, doesn't really happen. Yeah. Although maybe it does. I don't know.
You know what, man? Honestly, I think that we're dealing with a self-replicating species, but it's been testing us. Look at the changeling phenomenon in European folklore. What were they doing? They were taking our babies and replacing them with something else. Looked a lot like the child, but it wasn't.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's a very chilling reminder that, again, I think they've been running tests on us through religions and through these different folklores that we have in history, but they're evolving according to our ignorance of them. And so, I won't ramble, but
No, that's
Please do.
it also harkens to the idea of like the collective consciousness. It's something that I believe in. So if you can slowly evolve that,
Yeah.
you can take over the planet. Really, like slowly,
Oh yeah.
people are slowly changing, and like when we talk about Rh negative blood, even the
Mhm.
where did it come from? Well, I don't know.
Yep.
Why is there no rhesus monkey in there? We don't know.
Mhm.
Chris calls me a lizard. So thank a reptilian. So
Lizard.
Sure. I know I read an account of an abductee who was talking about the Arcturians, right? And he thought that the Arcturians had abducted him, and they told him through that same kind of telepathy that we were just talking about, right? It was a consciousness. He knew what they meant, though it wasn't like words. They said, we are not really from that planet. We're from your planet. But
Ooh, really?
right. And it
But-
was a future race.
and they were coming in interdimensionally.
They were
Yeah.
Arcturian, but he wasn't from the planet you would expect. He
Right.
was right from Earth, and that was the message that they gave this kid.
Oh, that's intense.
Yeah.
So interacting with life forms that are not where we are, and not even when we are.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
It's intense.
Right. And he could come back and give this message. So you think about the slow evolution, think about the collective consciousness of how people even perceive a UFO. In the 50s and 60s, it was a flying saucer, and then it evolves into this kind of triangle. And now you're talking about that
Pyramid.
triangle now flipping up, becoming a pyramid.
Oh
And
my
how-
God, dude.
That's what people will start to see because the collective consciousness is changing.
The
about-
more we evolve and we change, it seems like the more they evolve and change.
Yeah, there's a teaching. It's almost like not a re-indoctrination program, but it's almost like they're watching us evolve, and then once we evolve to a certain level, a certain stage, they go even further in their manifestations. I would like to suggest, though, like I've always have, because I began this interview today with the threat that it's obviously here in my mind. A lot of these entities are not who we think they are. They've manipulated a lot of us into believing that they're Mother Mary, that they're Jesus, that they're Muhammad, and what they've been doing is they've been using our beliefs against us. Do you believe I am who I say I am? Oh, okay, yeah. Well, why? It's not because we would believe them, but they would manifest in an image that we would prefer them to be.
Right.
Right.
There's a movie coming out, or I don't know if it's out yet, called The Unholy, and it's all about Mary Magdalene. Yeah, and that's what just reminded me of that.
Hmm.
It's
It's called Mariolatry, and guys, we did not start having abductions with Mother Mary in them until we started believing she was divine,
Ooh, that's
like in Catholicism.
right.
That hits hard, doesn't it? Why? Because again, they're looking to see, okay, what are you willing to believe in? And then I will manifest according to your belief system. And I think a lot of times, like even if we go into Ariel Master's book, Eros and Evil, these demons that were manifesting to witches, and for the purpose of intercourse, both Masters and Montague Summers said that these entities would manifest as demons, but then during the act of intercourse, the male appendage turned out not to be a male appendage at all. It turned out to be metallic. And there are a lot of times where it wasn't just one metallic probe, but there would be 3 or 4 of them at the same experience.
Good Lord, I feel
Wow.
bad for them.
Oh yeah. It would completely drain their energy, spiritually, physically, everything. They were just left to die sometimes. And so my point here, guys, is what were they doing even in the medieval period? I'm going to manifest as a demon because that's what you would probably prefer me to be. And then during intercourse, it's not intercourse. I'm introducing things into your body, and I'm removing other things out of it. That's UFO abduction.
Yes, it
Exactly.
is.
101 right there. The probe, the insemination, the removal. These things seem to harken back, and this way of humans, as we know ourselves, which we can't totally explain ourselves in our origin, changing, and having this group consciousness of like what things are, and the idea of worshiping of idolatry, like you mentioned,
Right.
and changing and having cultures that never knew each other, having pyramids and different things that seem to be a reflection. There's a reason why this
Hmm.
happened. There has to be.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right.
It's like
The
they
the
were.
only Mhm.
God, sorry.
almost good.
I was just going to say, it's like they were always here. How do you explain
Yeah.
something like the Great Serpent Mound right there in Ohio, where you're at?
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
where does that come from? You know,
Exactly right. You know,
you know.
it's so strange because if we're looking at different religions that are popping up across the world, obviously they're going to be different. So I'm looking for a common behavioral pattern, a thematic element that has like universally went throughout history that would unite all of them. And you know what I mean? To where it's like, okay, yeah, their presence has always been here. Well, what about their footprints? Where can I find them? Because it has to be, like one manifestation or one culture that unifies all others. But that's not what it looks like. It looks like we're dealing with entities that will become whatever we want them to be so that they can manipulate us to giving whatever they want from us.
Right. That's very true.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
mind blowing.
Go
And
back to the Zichin and the gold. Why the gold? Is it
Mhm.
to learn how to manipulate it for
I don't know.
instance, or what? Why? What the need? Or was it really even maybe something else?
instead of using the word
Harvard.
space
Mhm.
or space.
I'm a big fan of Sitchin's work. A lot of this stuff gets mistranslated. Um, who was his name? Michael Heiser has some good thoughts on Hitchens. I love Hitchens to death. Um, but there's a lot of stuff that I disagree with him on. But it's not like major. But I guess, guys, what we have here is it's some form of metallurgy. Obviously, like I said before, it's consciousness in metal. But even in Genesis 6, it says that once these sons of God made wives and had intercourse with them, it wasn't that they just gave semen and created a species that self replicates. They also gave them metallic gifts. Again, are these implants? And has our ancestors just, they didn't know what an implant was. That would have been just a gift. We know,
Hmm.
that's what I'm thinking about.
Shiny things.
That's me.
Really, what is man's obsession with gold? Really, when you think about it, like
Yeah.
why has it always been such a valuable asset and is to this day to make
Hmm.
jewelry? How valuable is jewelry, right? And
Well, that's what
why
it was back in
did
the
they
ancient,
even care?
but way before,
Just
like
because it was shiny?
the Egyptians, like you're saying, the Anunnaki, they were digging for it.
Mm.
But it's only a theory that they wanted to take it back to their planet.
Right.
We don't know this. We don't know a lot of
Right.
things. Theory.
Right.
It's all a theory.
What we do know, okay, here let's get to the brass tacks of it. The one thing we do know is that there is a life form that is invading our reality. It does not abide by our rules. There's not one rule, in fact, that it abides by. It's intercultural. It's interreligious. It can fly into any of our airspaces. It could fly 70,000 above our 70,000 feet above our missile silos and just cancel them at will.
Now, when you say
It's
that,
just
real quick, I just want to know: are they? Is it an EMP or are they like shooting down a beam of light when they go over there
uh,
over the?
they've done that to missiles before, but we don't know exactly how they did it. We just know that we had them on radar. Boom, and next thing you know what I mean? This
Yeah,
is like
that's nuts.
it's not no big deal, not a threat. Okay, let somebody do that to your house. Just walk in, eat your food, right? If
Right,
Yeah,
this was China
exactly.
doing this, would it be a threat?
Right.
of course, of course.
Right.
So,
It's like I don't know. I know. I'm like,
Point because, and I mentioned half jokingly, I guess, about the illegal aliens, and we talk about like look how weak we are as a global race, where we have these countries and these kind of things, and we're always fighting amongst each other. How easy is it to slip in under the guise of
of course.
military warfare or whatever, in cultures? You don't know. You could be changing the race itself over time.
Mhm.
Simply, oh well, we thought that falling satellite might have been a UFO or whatever, or,
Right.
Russian technology, and it's really something else. and people evolve and things change, and you know,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
It's
gradual.
alarming.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
and it just goes like right under the radar. Like, you know, that
Yeah, I
occurs.
don't understand that either. I mean, I know there's a lot of great researchers out there, and I mean, I have the utmost respect for them. But when we start looking at the case studies, the data sample, it's I think it's impossible to come back saying, okay, we shouldn't worry about them or we shouldn't take them as a threat. Again, we're not dealing with somebody who just says, you know what, I'm going to pick you up in my car. Let's just kidnap you. I mean, we would consider that a threat, but not them pulling our souls out of our bodies. Absolutely not.
No, no. Do you think that
You
the
know how crazy that is?
basis
It is.
of
It's like, okay.
alien species, do you think there are many of them? I mean, people often talk about, well, this one, like I mentioned, Arcturians, and there's this big long
Mhm.
list of names floating around about who and what races exist.
Nords.
How do you, the Nords, right? And how do you feel about that? Do you think they are all different, or do you think they represent maybe one species?
I don't know. Because I know we have a lot of different aircraft in the sky. Um, tell you what, guys, a lot of these ships that we're seeing in the sky, they look like orbs. The
Yes.
way they operate, the way they manifest. And I do believe our ancestors, especially in the Golan Heights area of Israel, they saw these things. And so again, their perception of that was it was the afterlife. And so they actually created what's called the Gilgal Rephaim. It looks like an orb. It's got the
Hmm.
structure and everything. And so they made it out of rocks and stones and everything. But the word Gilgal Rephaim means the wheel of souls. And I think
Interesting.
it's highly possible a lot of what we're witnessing is consciousness. But it's consciousness unlike anything that we've learned about or ever knew existed. And I think a lot of times, in order to go into the future, we have to go back into the past and say, okay, maybe they weren't all ignorant. Maybe there is a portion of what they experienced that we need to look at.
We do.
Absolutely.
We're right
There's,
with you.
there's so
Yes.
many common threads that go through it. Even something like the idea of the will-o-wisp. Okay, and I
What's with
can't
the
think
willow?
of the original name for it because it's evolved over time, right? There's a lot of names for what we call a will-o-wisp or type
Wisp,
Wonka,
wisp of
Mhm.
fairies, things of that nature. But I know one of them, one of the earliest recognitions of these kind of like blue flame things that would appear, meant, and I think it might have been Germanic, but I'm not 100% sure. The translation was corpse candle, and it
Ooh,
was seen in cemeteries.
Yeah.
I'm all over that, man. I'm gonna research that. That's interesting.
Mm. Yeah,
Corpse
I,
scandal.
I'll get you the actual name, what it was called in literature at that of that
Yeah.
time,
We'll
but the
send it to.
translation is corpse
It
candle.
better be as cool as that. I hope he didn't just. I'm just kidding. It'd be something like something way different. I'm like, what? You're like, yeah, the
I meant to write it down.
Yeah.
I wanted to
no,
tell you.
man, you're good. That's a pretty cool name for it, though. Wow. These are different forms of consciousness. But again, there are some of these ships that obviously they're metallic. But it appears to be the same technology that we see orbs possessing. One of my mentors, Dr. Michael Lynch, he shot an orb with a laser to try to get the temperature with the laser. And when he did, he said the light refracted off the orb itself. So we're talking about a some kind of consciousness or technology that can go through a wall and then solidify to where light will refract off of it.
The
Very,
folks,
very strange stuff here,
yeah,
guys.
right, right.
Do you think it was like some kind of a force field around that
I don't
to
know.
make it reflect?
So he wasn't
We
able
don't
to get
know.
a reading, right? It just
He
reflected
didn't get a reading. I don't believe he might have. I forget if he told me
coming
he
back
did or
to
not.
the unit.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
reflected off it and probably did not. I think the way
But there,
that works, it hits it reflects
yeah,
back to the temperature.
but there's something else that's at play here too. Because he said, you know what? He said, I've seen orbs before. He said, and they would actually go into people's body and fly out the other side. Now, what if that solidified in the body?
Oh,
Mm,
Correct?
right, there's an
true.
implant.
Do they have? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and if it can, then why aren't they doing that? You know,
That's True. Yeah. I didn't even look at it like that.
Yeah. So there, these entities. I don't know. I don't know. I won't ramble because we can talk about anything. I know. You know how
We
we
always.
are. So
Yeah, that's right.
That's all right, man. We keep it loose as a goose because we
Yeah.
get the real stuff here.
yeah, man. I I talked to an experiencer recently. He's a lifelong experiencer. His wife was too, and he conveyed an experience he had that was perhaps the most chilling uh, experience I've ever heard. I mean, and my research, like I get into some very dark stuff because I want to sift through it and figure out what the heck's going on. He
Mm.
said one night, he said him and his wife were in bed. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and he said he feels something moving underneath his covers.
Uh-huh.
And he wakes up and he's going, he's like, man, he goes, because I don't have a dog. He says, all of my children are grown. He says, I pull the cover back. There is a he says there's a 3-year-old girl underneath my covers. And she looks up at him, and I think she was 3, however old she was young enough to be like really young, and then, but she could talk. And so she looks at him, and he said, I picked her up and I looked at her, and he's like, dude, he goes, it was a little girl in my bed. The first thing out of her mouth is, I'm dead.
Oh, Ducky.
Then he says, she points into the corner of the room, and he says, I see another little boy younger than her. And she says, that's my brother. He's dead too, but he just doesn't know it. He said, our father burned us alive. So,
Oh,
this is a man that's prone to abduction experiences only. Both him and his wife have had multiple abduction experiences throughout their entire lives, sometimes together, sometimes separate. But he said this was far different than anything I've ever experienced before, because it seemed like it was pushing an issue with me. It wasn't it was like okay, I'm used to being abducted to as much as I could be. He said, but this is a whole nother level. And he asked me what I thought of it, and I said I don't really know what to think of it, but we got to talk about it because again, this gets down to necromancy and forms of the afterlife that I don't think we're prepared to accept.
and the shifting of consciousness. Yeah,
Yeah.
because the consciousness of the deceased person obviously
Yeah.
still exists somehow and is able to take those same roads to people,
Mhm.
and people open to these abductions, which I think is what you're getting at. Can also be open
Absolutely.
to talking
That's
to
where I
the
was gonna.
deceased,
Right.
discarnate,
That's what I was just
Yeah.
gonna ask.
Yeah. Yeah. And
outside
what an
body.
incredible story, though, man. Oh my
Absolutely.
God.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
was stunned.
Disturbing.
It's disturbing, but it's like now that how many other people have had this happen?
Hmm.
You know, and we should start
Yep.
studying that as well.
Yeah, and
Yep.
it gets back to our consciousness, and how many people have experiences when they're just about between a sleep state and an awake state, and the consciousness kind of in that shift. I mean,
Mm.
sleep still can't be quite explained, but
Yes.
something happens. Maybe it's a lucid dream, maybe it's astral
Right.
projection, maybe it's talking to a deceased relative, maybe it's an
Right.
experience with an alien.
Right. Whatever this is, man, it's mentioned in Ezekiel 13 because these entities that were in that chapter were called dream demons. Dream demons. And so what they were doing is I mean, this is obviously UFO abduction too. I mean, they would go into the houses at nighttime, then they would induce these people into sleep states. And then they would wait till their soul is separated from their body, and then they'd capture the soul. That right there, oh my God, that's Betty Luca. That's Betty and Bob Luca, where Bob wakes up in the middle of the night to see his wife's apparition just lift out of her body while she's sleeping and goes out through the window. And guys, Betty Luca was conscious and remembered being abducted. But they had the ability, not only the ability, they had the knowledge. They had the knowledge and the ability to take the soul out of the body and keep the body itself alive.
Right.
Unbelievable. I mean, I can't stress it enough. What are we dealing with here?
We don't know. And
I mean, yeah.
exactly what you said. We need to start looking at all of these correlations together.
Yeah.
One lump sum, not just
That and the quantum, and the ability to change things through intent, which is now proved through science. And
Yep.
it goes faster than anything we could record. It just happens. Our intent changes the outcome.
right.
It's shown in a laboratory experiment after a laboratory experiment. It happens on a quantum level, and we're just on the cusp of understanding what that is. How does
Yeah,
that
and we might be the dumb cousin of the family, We think, the arrogance and midnight. No, it's the arrogance and imagination of men, and then we show up to the dinner table, and it's like, oh crap,
Was
we got to
very
go
well.
home and I'm sorry, yeah. Oh no,
I needed that laugh. Thank you.
yeah, we get over there, man, and we're like, dang it. So, but I mean, getting back to the abduction phenomenon, what are they studying? I think that they're studying the soul. Um,
I agree.
Dr. Michael Lynch, he just posted on my timeline, so I bet he's watching. He's awesome, man. So,
And
consciousness. Okay, this idea of consciousness and how they're peeling it out of people. I do believe that a lot of what we're calling scoop marks has been manifested on the body, but it manifested on the soul first. Because it's just like that case I had with the remote viewer. Once his soul got back into his body, then his body began to manifest things. Like if you look at Ian Stevenson's work, Ian Stevenson worked with a lot of people who have past lives. So a lot of these individuals would remember their former names. They would remember their former lives. They would actually have language preference. They knew about the language and could talk it and all that stuff. But more importantly, they would have a birthmark on their body. And when asked about the birthmark, they said, oh, yeah, that's how I got killed. I got stabbed there, or I broke my neck. But whatever happened to her soul or their soul, guess what it did? Manifested on the body.
oh,
Right. This is something I've heard about
We've
before.
seen
People have said that. Yeah, with
yes.
the birthmarks and kind of thing, and it was their past life, through past life
Yeah.
regression. Maybe hypnosis techniques, you find out, wow, that birthmark, is where you were impaled with a spear or something, so-
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, he is watching, by the way. Awesome. Means a lot to me. Yeah, I thought he was. So, thank God. But this concept of consciousness existing out of body, I think that's the most remarkable revelation that we've seen yet in this entire research. That they're pulling consciousness. Number one, the consciousness can remember out of the body. It can interact out of the body. And I think that if we start realizing that they're so far beyond us in terms of not just science, but spirituality, because what they're doing is they're forcing the conversation out of physics. Okay, I'm just going to throw this out there. Outside of materialism only, and they're forcing us to ask questions that we weren't ready for. Number one, if religion doesn't have anything to say about this, then why did it know what a soul was before we had UFO abductions going on?
Right.
That's
So I'll shut up. But
Where
it's so
spirituality
don't
meets
see you
science.
shut up. Keep
really.
going.
It meets science, and the science was always there.
Yeah,
They were always
was.
there. And they were certainly maybe our early gods. Maybe our later
Yeah. Yep. Ancestors who, they could be coming back to teach us something. But again, the currency of consciousness exists. Like if you go to Ezekiel 13, Yahweh makes a startling claim as to how some of these entities are existing in our world and how they're surviving. He says that those who should live die, those who should die live. In other words, the reason those who should die are living is because they're killing those who should live. So there's a harvesting going on here.
You had mentioned that before.
Yeah.
Like a harvesting.
Yeah.
And that's crazy when you think about that really deeply.
Oh, I see. Michael Lynch has actually commented here. And put that up there.
What's up, buddy? There we go.
Right on target.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Yes, you are.
It's troubling, and I think that and it's not that I dislike researchers that believe it on a threat. That's not the case at all. I love, I high respect a lot of people in my field who have different philosophies and theories from me, but I think that we're losing time here. There's going to come to a time where we should have taken them as a threat, and we didn't.
Yes.
Until it's too late.
Right. I think we should stop fighting amongst ourselves, meaning country to country, and start thinking more of global nature.
Sure.
What occurs globally.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. These things are. Although in our United States pop culture, the UFO always lands on the White House lawn, but that's not really true. These things happen all over the world. Have always
globally
happened all over the world. Abduction, possessions, necromancy, religions rising and falling. It's a global thing. Yeah.
It's a global phenomenon. And I'll tell you what else is really cool, too. If you go back into the Bible and you look at what their form of leprosy was, it's going to blow your mind, man. It was not Hansen's disease, right? That's what leprosy is today in the 21st century. Their version of leprosy was spiritual first, right? We're talking about consciousness and body, and it manifests on the body. It was spiritual first, and then it became a skin condition. Boom.
No kidding.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. That's pretty.
And right, because I'm getting excited, man.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right. So
some things for it.
The skin condition existed because the spirit was sick, or they said also that the spirit had come in contact with false prophets. In Ezekiel 13, Yahweh calls them false prophets. He says, you say I sent you, and I didn't. That's what they're doing. That's why Dr. Carla Turner wrote the book, Masquerade of Angels. So that goes back to whatever happens to the spirit, the soul, happens to the body. Spirit first, body second. Incredible. Unbelievable.
Clarify a little bit. When we say necromancy, we're talking really about corporeal necromancy, which is something that's a little different than just asking deceased spirit to do something for you. It is where the deceased spirit comes back into the flesh of or the spirit comes back into the flesh of a deceased human and takes it over. If that there is not a true life or consciousness within that maybe it wasn't the same as the original, I would imagine that person may appear and slowly rot. Maybe it's
it's reanimation. Yes.
Like a zombie, really.
Yes. The living undead.
Pop terms.
Undead.
Right.
Yeah. That's what they experienced in Genesis, and the Ammonites experienced them when they went into Canaan. They said that they were a species of necromancers. They had a language. I know I talked about this before with you guys. That was a buzzing language. It was a chirping and whispering language. And some of these abducting entities have demonstrated that language to their experiencers. Where the experiencer is he's been abducted, and now he hears. We have one abduction case where there was a hooded figure over him, and he was chanting a prayer. So,
sounds familiar.
Crazy, man.
Right. Michael Lynch says spiritual science is not in the Bible. There is a science.
I believe that. Absolutely.
So it's really interesting stuff. So
terribly. It's interesting to me how long or how far it goes back.
Yes.
When we talk about primitive civilizations, And then, we're discovering civilizations. Like Kristen loves ancient civilizations, and I do too, but she's into them, Göbekli Tepe and things like that. We don't even know what's going on there, or what those
Right.
symbols, the scorpion, why those carvings.
Right.
Are these same
We
events
don't.
happening? And
Yeah.
Tell
yeah,
you what, man, when the Library of Alexandria went up in smoke, we lost half of our existence.
yeah,
I know.
yeah.
I know. That was a shame.
That is a loss, absolutely.
But we don't even
It's
know. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. We
We
don't even know
what language that the people of Göbekli Tepe spoke. So
Right. I always goof on like the
Yeah.
clicking noises, like insects. Maybe there's like
and
these
the
kind of
chirping
clicking
noises, and that's
but
really
maybe it was something more like what you mentioned at the front of the show, which is these, alien creatures with no mouths and just communing telepathically.
well. When you look at those T stones, you see they depicted a body with a belt on, and it really looks like something otherworldly. It looks like
an astronaut or something.
exactly. So, maybe they did that as well, and maybe that's their god, or well, quote them their god, and they maybe started that as well, and that's where the Mesopotamians and the Sumerians got the metallic jars, from.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
the
science.
desire to mine metal,
Yeah.
gold or whatever metal.
You're exactly right. The problem with us is we need to know where we are at in history, and obviously we won't. But at the same time, it's like, our existence as humanity is not. What if it's like this much compared to their existence that has been just light years and light years and light years and light years, and we're encountering them, and they literally have to diminish their own selves just so we can understand them philosophically. But yeah. So
When you say diminish them themselves, can you clarify that a little bit? What do you mean, like
yeah. So
UFOs or?
like that's actually a concept that comes from theology. A lot of your mystics would say that God would have to shrink himself just so that when he communicated with us, we wouldn't have our minds blown and just go off and go have to take happy pills or anything, and he had to make and essentially, but yeah, he would have to diminish himself and shrink his existence to where he would make himself smaller so we would be able to perceive him. But I mean, obviously
That makes
it's
a lot.
going on to a degree. Yeah, but my God, man, we are looking at a self-replicating species that's using our women to do so. That's a threat.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. Do you think, just to hit on this again, if they're using our women, if they're using our populating with humans, where are the children going? Are they going somewhere else, or are they, like you mentioned before, flowing back into society in some way, slowly evolving the race, or maybe hyper evolving the race?
Yeah, we don't know if they're evolving ours or theirs, right?
Right.
Right.
So you have David Jacobs, who says that they're creating hybrids, and that a lot of these hybrids are like they're unfamiliar with the world, and like they have a hard time learning how to drive a car. They're socially awkward, and they would actually have people that would mentor them and how to experience life in this dimension and everything. But that's almost the same thing as like possession, because when you have possession, you have memory and motion. And you have, like, let's say you have a demoniac, and you have an entity possessing the demoniac. His memory is going to be limited. He may get knowledge that he'll pull out of the air or pull from you as a person in front of him. But a lot of them have memory preference, language preference, the belief systems. And so it's awkward for them to be in this dimension because they're not from it. They're not from this time frame. They're not from this time period.
Right.
Of course they would lack social skills in the 21st century. I do sometimes.
Sure, exactly. Michael Lynch has commented on seeding other planets, which was going to go to that.
That's a good theory, yeah.
We don't know what they're going through, and if they're able to come to us, maybe they have an atmospheric issues, and the idea of our flesh is something about our physical bodies that can stand an atmosphere, say on the other side of the universe. It's just a thought.
Very good point. Very good point.
Something about us.
And yeah, it's a great point, man. And like I said, it's difficult to perceive if they're enhancing us or enhancing themselves. One thing that is a thematic element that threads the needle for all of this phenomenon is that they're very interested in consciousness. It may be that they don't have it, or they don't have something that we have, like a soul, and so therefore they're investigating us to look introspectively at themselves and say, okay, we don't have what you have. You know, they could be like a bug, right?
Right.
Who just dies, and so now they're trying to figure out, okay, what's going on, because that's pretty much what they've been saying to a lot of abductees is that, okay, listen, you know, you're not just flesh and blood.
Right. Steal the soul.
Soul, yeah.
Soul hunters.
Soul
That's
hunters.
it. We've discussed that before in
Right.
the past as well.
So, in some weird way, reminds me of that 1980s movie Phantasm, where the aliens came and would take over funeral homes and use the bodies and shrink them and turn them into slaves. It was a favorite movie of mine when I was a kid.
I kept hearing that reference before. I gotta watch that, man. It sounds interesting.
It's just so out there. It was
Is
a really
very out there.
forward-thinking movie for its time. You know, in the time of slasher movies.
You gonna show that?
Yeah, we got another
We have a-
comment here from James Whitfield. When God met Moses, took what Moses looked like, and Hod formed as a burning bush.
Yeah. In the Hebrew, it's an olive tav, and the bush was not consumed. hmm When you get real quick though, when you get, because you mentioned you know, the living dead and corpses and stuff, there is a strong possibility that what we're witnessing, referring back to some of these semen samples they're harvesting and stuff, it could be what's called scatology. Now, scatology in the occult is when you collect samples, organic samples, biological samples, and you make a concoction out of it. And then it'll induce some kind of spiritual state in the body. It's not, what is it called, ayahuasca? It's not that. It's similar. There was one Norwegian anthropologist who had found a ritual that was like 1,000 years old or something crazy like that. And he actually went across the world and collected these different plants and different substances. And he said that he performed the ritual to the T, and it came out to be this paste and this ointment. And so they did an experiment where he took the ointment and rubbed it on his body. And when he did, he said it was like his soul left his body and he entered into a room.
Into a room. No
Yes.
less.
So to him, it would have looked like an abduction. So
Exactly.
again, right? It's a form of medicine
Mhm.
and it's science.
True. That's the big thing here. Is
Right, it's like a science that we haven't
and
quite proved yet, you know.
it's all theory. So
And talk
right.
about that corporeal necromancy, reanimation again. You know, we're talking about putting
It's a movie too.
psychokinetic energy or some consciousness, maybe not a full consciousness, into, you know, a corpse and having it reanimate, and it would appear to have leprosy as it's rotting, right? That seems real practical. I know one thing I was just reading, it kind of relates to this in another way. Dr. Joseph Gallenberger, I believe his name is, Inner Vegas book talks about using PK or psychokinesis, holding seeds and being able to grow seeds in your hand with like an accelerated, you know, within a matter of an hour or something. The seeds start to blossom, right? So
That's
you're putting
fascinating.
a shifting of your energy into it, and
Into
it
it.
just starts to grow. That kind of ties a little bit into that idea of maybe they are trying to shift consciousness into us, but can't fully do it. You know,
Exactly
time-
right.
how many people have experienced the time loss? You know, abductees.
Right.
Hours just go missing. They don't know where they were. They were just kind
They
of
don't even know that they were
in another
abducted at
place.
that time.
Exactly. And that goes back to the point of this being what they would call dream demons. It's like when you dream, you're in a whole different reality. And then when you wake up, time loss. How long was I asleep for? 2 hours, 3 hours, 45 minutes. And so there's a contrast between our perception of time in a dream in our perception of time in this reality. And that's, again, I think that is one of their intentions when they're separating the soul. But in Ezekiel 13, he called them soul catchers. And he said this is very unique. He said, those who hunt the souls of men to make them fly. That's wild.
It
The
is.
soul itself is flying. And his reference was made to the Baal soul, which is the soul that floats over our body when we die or when we are asleep. So that's what they're catching. Well, of course that's what they're catching, because they're the ones who are inducing the sleep state in us to get that separated from us. And again, I think that what my research is leaning towards is obviously consciousness, but again, it's not just, okay, physical manifestations. I think that's happening because they're spiritual first. And I think that's what they're studying truthfully.
Right. A lot of this does boil down to the nature of consciousness. And do you think consciousness is spirit, or is it a window for spirit?
Oh, there's a lot of philosophies here.
Yeah.
I'm going, hey,
That's
want to get
the-
heady? We're going to get heady.
What'd you say?
I said, if we want to get heady, we get heady, because I love,
Okay. Yeah, man.
I like to think about this. I mean,
Well,
consciousness, we relate it as the soul, but perhaps it's a window. If it shifts so easy, are we just changing windows? Or are we just looking through a different window?
Right.
okay, yeah, it's a good question. I would say this. The ancients wrestled with the idea of body, soul, and spirit, but that was Greek. When you go back into history, even before the Greek religion or the Greek language and all that, what we have here is an apparition. That was what's called Lil. So before Lilith, we had the consciousness that leaves the body and it manifests in the apparition. So we have been seeing Lil in hauntings for millennia. Now, that entity evolved through human thought into Lilith.
Hmm.
Right.
And so the etymology says, it basically implies her nature, who she was, and what she is. She's not just consciousness, but she's a consciousness that manifests as an apparition. And then it went into an apparition of consciousness that harvests semen from men and then manifests as an incubus to implant it in living women. Now,
Right.
that's demonology, but it sounds remarkably like the UFO abduction phenomenon.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it does.
It does.
It does. Again, it's as if they've always been there. So when we talk about the soul and we talk about consciousness, are we talking about one and the same thing, and has it always existed?
I
Or
think so.
are there a set number, or do you think they have just regenerated?
Okay, so going back into the views of the afterlife.
I know it's kind of a weird question. Population
No,
grows.
it's not a weird question at all. It's a good question.
Out there.
The views of the afterlife was like, okay, there was a certain time frame between death and when they would no longer appear as apparitions, or not even that, they would no longer remember this dimension at all. Their memory would be wiped, and then they would know nothing about this dimension. And so what would happen with your necromancers is that if they wanted to pull up an apparition of somebody, that individual had to have died within the last 12 months. Number one, that way they could still appear. Number two, this is very unique too, their memory would still be in place. And so that was your very first familiar spirit. Ooh, because it was still familiar with this world.
Got you. Okay. That
Right.
Makes sense?
love
Yeah,
it like
that makes
that.
total sense.
Thank you.
And yeah, that definitely correlates with a lot of things they say, you should not. And I mean, I agree with this. Like, try to talk
Yep.
to the recently deceased, right? There
Yep.
are people out there that make a living off that on YouTube, like Steve Huff, who we don't like.
Right? They're like, did you hear what he said? I'm like, no. It's like, he said root beer, duh.
Okay.
No, I don't think I heard that at all.
The idea of respect, but
That's what it
there's
is. Respect.
I've heard other psychic mediums say, like, they don't want to talk to any spirit within, say, 4 months, but they want to talk to them.
Yep.
So it's still familiar, so there's still some sort of memory.
you know what? There was who was it? Yeah. So, anyways, the idea here is that when they die, they have a limit of time where their memory is wiped. That's what the belief was. And so, when you would call somebody from the grave, they would have to have, if you're going to get anything from them, they believed they would have to have died within the last 12 months. It's just like your other form of necromancy, where they said you could not reanimate the body unless they were recently deceased. Now, okay, follow me here. In Genesis 6, according to the Apocrypha of John, it says that these entities manifested to women in the images of their husbands, but only when their husbands were away.
Hmm.
Is it, I'm going to throw this out there. I know this is just, I don't know, me just throwing it out there and stuff, but is it possible that they waited until these husbands were dead and then they manifested to the wives, recently deceased, just like a necromancer would? I know that's a hypothesis, but whatever.
Yeah. Now that makes sense. I guess the question would be, was it a corporeal reanimation, necromancy, or is it more a vision state? Like, they perceived them, but they weren't maybe physically there. They could feel them, they could
Okay,
touch, but it wasn't
both of
actually
them,
the corpse of the husband who maybe
both,
died on a hunting trip or something.
both, because we have Montague Summers is one of the great researchers that said that they were witnessing these entities go into graveyards and reanimate somebody that's dead. And then they would reanimate either the part, like the appendage, in order to harvest substances, or even in like Ariel Master's book, the medieval period, they would actually possess corpses and then use the corpse through full possession, reanimation, to have intercourse with the women. So there's something that has to be mentioned here. There has to be a difference between a semen sample that comes from a recently deceased male and a living sample that comes from a living man, right? And I
Right.
think it's not just, okay, well, how can that happen and stuff? I don't care what our science says about it. Whatever's happening, it's almost like they're using that to reproduce their species.
Oh, yeah, that's mind blowing too. I
Hmm.
agree with that.
The
Definitely.
living undead.
Mm, I definitely agree with that. But how would you go and search like that essence, as you called it last time? I mean,
Yeah.
with our technology now, I mean, how would you go about that?
Okay. What I would do is this. Um, what we have to do is we have to become more of, I guess, more accepting of female victims of incubi. I've been contacted by about 5 or 6 different women who have encountered incubus spirits, and when the entity realized they had a hysterectomy between its last visit,
Hmm.
the phenomenon stops, just dissolves into nothingness, and the entity's never to be seen from again. And one lady said, she emailed me and she said that she was on the highway when she heard me mention that there were women that were not being visited again once they had hysterectomy. She said she pulled off the side of the road and began to bawl because she had been experiencing these attacks, and she had a hysterectomy, and they've no longer been there. And she said, it really made sense, and I'm glad that I'm not alone. So she said also, more importantly, she said we have no advocacy in this area. And so what we need to do as researchers is we need to stay close to these women as researchers, because
Yes.
Sinistrari saw these women back in his day and age with semen samples in the bed within an hour of the event taking place. So I
Right.
will suggest, if we can collect the semen samples, right,
Right.
and we could test them. What if we can collect a semen sample and the guy's been dead for the last 6 months?
Yeah.
Yeah,
True.
exactly. Ectoplasm of a different sort.
Right.
Um, Yeah, no, I
That's why
totally
I
agree.
question that. I'm like, well, how are we going to go about
And
it?
if there's offspring involved, what is the DNA?
Right.
Exactly. I was going to say that too. I don't really want
That's
to.
a game changer, isn't it? Oh my God.
Oh God, yeah.
When you
Yeah.
do like a DNA testing on that offspring, their
Sure.
offspring.
And then back in those days, they obviously had no way of telling. They just might have thought,
Right.
that's a little different.
In
And just-
Sinistrari, and Montague Summers said that there were a lot of these samples that were black. And it was as if, again, that they came from a deceased body.
I was just going to say that's dead tissue. And yeah. Oh, goodness.
What in the H are we wrestling with here, guys?
We don't know. And this is where we're going with this. We, as like you said, all of us as researchers really need to take this on and figure
Yep.
this all out. And that's what we're trying to do.
And then you see the parallels, obviously, with modern abduction.
Exactly. And
It's
the
like
ghost
it's always been
phenomenon.
there.
Right.
Oh
And
yeah. Oh yeah.
there's no real explanation for how we evolved. I mean, it's just evolution, but I mean, there's a lot of big open questions. Like they don't quite know how we got to where we got to.
Right.
So you wonder if maybe that fills in some of the blanks.
It may. I'm hoping it does, and I'm hoping that this disclosure that's supposed to be coming in June isn't just all about manifestation. Because, guys, I grew up in Pentecostalism. I've seen manifestation before. I mean, I've been in services where people had cataracts fell off and stuff. There's been a lot of stuff, because they were all in the supernatural. But again, even in my experience with Pentecostalism, just because you have a miracle doesn't mean the person, is a good individual or a good spirit. A lot of times these things will manifest as something to get consent from you.
Right.
And then meanwhile,
Yeah, and it has to be some sort of something they need. I mean, why would they go through the trial? There's something in it for them. Whether it's the seeding of a planet or some sort of metallurgy.
Right. The species that self-replicates. But here's what it also tells me. It tells me that they don't have their own seed.
Right.
Or if they do it, obviously it's not going to work with our women.
Yeah. They need something in our DNA
Exactly.
with theirs to survive, or I don't know. It's something that gives them pleasure in some way.
What about? I'm going to throw this out there for you because a lot of times I just speak with like a revelation, and I'll just throw ideas out there when I'm on the show because I love it. I love it. And I told you guys I'm going to bring some new stuff here. I think it's possible that they're merging seeds together and they're creating hybrids to see if somebody will give that hybrid consciousness. So the idea would be, is consciousness located to just our species? And if they merge their species with ours, would their species somehow become conscious because of it?
Ooh.
You'll have a different experience.
It's interesting, ain't it, Bob? Yeah.
Absolutely. That is very interesting.
That's intense.
It is. It's another heady thing,
It's heady. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have a big head, big forehead.
No,
I got a
you
fight head.
do not.
Oh, dude, you know how far stretched these headphones are?
Come on,
Like they're
guys.
about to snap right in the middle. So.
Right. I heard her pleading for mercy earlier. I didn't know what to say. No, I'm just kidding. They're like, oh no, Lord, please. Nah, man.
No,
So, this thing is terrifying, man.
It
I
is.
mean-
It is.
why does the spirit remember things from the life? There's something about it that's not experienced on that side. Whether it's
Exactly right.
sex or the joy of children or whatever it is, that does not translate on the other side once the consciousness has left the body. I mean, why wouldn't that be true for aliens? Another race or
Correct.
species. There's something about our species and our existence, more aptly put, that they desire.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Especially where
What's
we
really
see
going on here?
drone-like or without any real thought. Like we started off the show talking about these aliens and them being sort of mechanical almost in a way, and it just being one big consciousness, the ship, the vessel, not people, but the aliens within it, the group, all being kind of like, one, kind of like the Borg, right? Then they're sitting
Right.
there as one thing, making its way into our perception or being visible to us through our five senses and what we can experience.
Right.
Hmm.
There's something there that we can experience that they can't. That it could be that mirror reflection.
Yes, you're exactly right. There's a need in them. I don't believe it's a want. I believe it's a need. Like if we're going to go back into, this is crazy too. We have pictures of UAP, that they look like circles of air, like air pockets, like breath or something, like a cloud that's in a circle that just hovers. In what I think we're looking at is the evolution of consciousness in some of these UAP. It's not, see, our issue as humans is we don't know what consciousness looks like, if it has an appearance at all, and we don't know how we would manifest when we die. Obviously, we have apparitions, but what if you have a small orb and then that orb gets bigger? What's that called? We would call that a UFO.
That's true too.
Takes on a form, a shape.
Yeah.
Again,
That's very
cultural
interesting.
references of what UFOs are supposed to look like. You know what I mean? People perceive them through time, and they can
Yeah.
from saucers to triangles to pyramids.
Yep.
Yes.
In fact, there's a something else I was going to tell you. Like we have a lot of people that say that that they'll go into murals and steles and say, they'll point at a ball of light that has wings. They'll say, see, that's a UFO. And it is, but it isn't, because the very first pictorial traditions of the Ba'a soul, right, mentioned in Ezekiel 13. This is what they made it look like: a ball of light with wings. And so we have a lot of people who are misinterpreting the Ba'a soul for UFOs. And I'm thinking, what if they're one and the same, many of them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at Chris, she's like,
I'm like, yeah, this is great.
yeah,
Yeah.
Connecting
I'm-
the dots over here.
Yeah.
that's
I really,
hilarious.
no, thank you. But I really am. That's very true. It's possibly what we were thinking. I was thinking about, I saw, and I don't like the picture of orbs or whatever, but I saw one the other night over here. So I was like, and it was traveling really fast and was extremely small. And I said to Chris, as usual, did you see that?
Did you see that?
Did you see that?
See that?
He goes,
Leave that.
nope. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, never mind. But I was just
Never
thinking,
mind.
yeah. And and I was like, wow.
My mom saw one, This is crazy, man. My mom saw one. She's never experienced anything really paranormal, but my parents used to have chickens, and one morning she went out to go feed them, and she was just doing her thing, but even just and then looked, and there was this ball of light about this big. She said it was just floating, and then it just shut up and just disappeared. So I thought that was really cool, because I've never seen an orb that big. I don't even think I have seen an. Did I? I may have seen an orb when I was a kid, but I couldn't prove it. It wasn't like head on.
Right.
But,
And we're talking about orbs that are not the same things that turn up in photographs as dust.
Exactly.
We're talking about an actual thing. And
Exactly.
A little like the will-o-wisp mentioned earlier.
With
Yep.
the bullet.
The corpse candle. I'm gonna look that up, man. That's so interesting.
I'm going to
gonna
get to
go with that
info,
now.
'cause you'll like this.
Yeah.
I came across some history that was kind of interesting.
I had another thing too. I was going to tell you, but it's getting later now since we started later. But the seven bowls, I looked into that. With the seven angels and things, and I wanted to go into that, but we've got like not many time. So that means you have to come back on, and you know what's going to happen when you come back on.
And we're going to break something else.
We're going to, all our energy
Dude.
comes together. Something's going to flip out.
It is every time.
It is
And
every time.
If you're new to our show, there's just something. I
Between
don't
all
know.
of us.
There is something that happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
things
I
get
love
hard, technologically, as far as getting the broadcast out or making the adverts for these things.
It's
Things
crazy.
happen that only happen
Craziness.
with
Only
the three
with
of us
Nate.
involved.
Yep. It
No
I
lie.
take it as confirmation, man. I mean, obviously,
That's what I had said to Chris the last time that this happened. I'm like, I'm telling you, there's something about it.
Yeah.
That is confirmation right there. Yeah.
We love you, man. We appreciate you coming
Yeah.
on.
Thank you. Thank you, because you were my birthday surprise.
We
were-
appreciate it.
birthday surprise.
You want my birthday
I wasn't
surprise?
gonna jump out of a cake or anything, but I'm
No,
glad
but
I'm here.
no, Chris was like, I've got a surprise for you for your birthday. You're going to love who's coming on. I'm like, cool.
And you didn't know it? Oh wow,
No,
that's
to
awesome.
speak, yeah. So thank you
Well,
so
happy
much.
birthday, sis.
Thank
You know how
you.
much I love you. You guys are amazing.
We appreciate it. We'll talk soon offline.
Yeah.
There's definitely some things I want to go over with you that we didn't get to. I just want to talk and stand with you
Yeah.
and
So
share information. So
you and Chris made my
next week,
day.
hey, we had a surprise guest next week. You'll like this. Is going to be Michelle Freed, who is remote viewing
Yeah.
teacher, and
Shout out to Michelle.
yeah, Michelle, she's going to be on, and we're going to talk about remote viewing, hypnosis, the subconscious. We're going to get into some deep and very cool things on that. So we'll look forward to that next week. And thank you again, my friend.
Thank
No
you.
problem. You guys have a good one.
You too.
Yeah,
Thank you,
too.
Nate.
Thank you.
Bye bye.